up, everyone, and welcome to Political Nerds. I'm Steph the Alter Nerd, your nerdy political guide from Washington, D.C. to Westminster and beyond. Now, of course, before I jump into this, the usual disclaimer. Do your own research, come to your own conclusions, and I'm not inciting hatred to anyone or particular group, religion, etc., but shiz the freaking bed. I'm doing this emergency red alert broadcast because, wow, there's so much information to get through. And it has just got a heck of a lot worse for Keir Starmer over this whole China spy case scandal, whatever the frick you want to call it, right? And so, yeah, before we continue, for those that are tuning in, whether live or on the replay, if you haven't done so already, please make sure you subscribe to Political Nerds here on YouTube. If you're watching me on X, make sure you're following me at Steph Alter Nerd for more updates as to what's really going on here in the UK. Thank you so much to everyone that's coming through right now. I appreciate all your faces. Let's get into it because there is a lot of ground to cover here. How Keir Starmer is still our Prime Minister at the moment. How he's not resigned by now. I'm absolutely at a loss here. Now, let's start here with this clip, right? Because Starmer initially blamed the Conservatives as to why the China spy trial collapsed. It's a little bit of a tongue twister, isn't it? The China spy trial. Okay, so let's start again. Starmer blamed the Conservatives as to why the China spy trial collapsed. Now let's hear him in full, because each word that comes out of his gob is just making it worse for himself. It's making the proverbial noose tighter around his neck. Here we go.
On that point, may I update the House on the China spy case? I'm deeply disappointed by the outcome. We wanted to see prosecutions. Mr. Speaker, I know just how seriously, rightly, that you take these matters. National security will always be the first priority of this government, and we will always defend against espionage. In recent weeks, there have been baseless accusations put about by the party opposite. Let me set out the facts. The relevant period was when these offences took place. That was under the Conservative government between the years of 2021 and 2023. This period was bookended by the integrated review of 2021, the beginning of the period, and the refresh of that review in 2023, setting out their policy. These statements of government policy were very carefully worded to not describe China as an enemy. Instead,
Sorry, Mr. Stewart. Somebody who is on the Speaker's panel, I've told once before, should know better. Do not question my judgment. I thought it was important that the Prime Minister tells this House first rather than somewhere else. So please, this is very important to me and very important to the House. I take it seriously, so I don't need any more side comments. Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The review of 21 and the refresh of 23 were very carefully worded to not describe China as an enemy. Instead, they stated increased national security protections where China poses a threat, and that the then government would engage with China to leave room open for constructive and predictable relations. The Deputy National Security Advisor, Matt Collins, set out the then government's position in a substantive witness statement in 2023, which was subsequently supplemented by 2 further short statements. The Cabinet Secretary assures me that the DSNA faithfully set out the policy of the then Tory government. I know firsthand that the DSNA is a civil servant of the utmost integrity, and those opposite who worked with him, I'm sure, would agree with that assessment. Under this government, no minister or special advisor played any role in the provision of evidence. I can't say what the position was of the previous government in relation to the involvement of ministers or special advisors. If the Leader of the Opposition knows the answer to that question, and I suspect that she does, I invite her to update the House. Last night, the Crown Prosecution Service clarified that, in their view, The decision whether to publish the witness statements of the DSNA is for the government. I have therefore carefully considered this question this morning, and after legal advice, I have decided to publish the witness statements. Given the information contained, we will conduct a short process, but I want to make clear I intend to publish the witness statements in full. Let me say this. To be clear, had the Conservatives been quicker in updating our legislation, a review that started in 2015, these individuals could have been prosecuted and we would not be where we are without.
Starmer trying to play the blame game there. Trying to blame the Conservatives as to why the China spy case absolutely collapsed, right? But, yeah, like I said before, he's just made the proverbial noose tighter around his neck. And yeah, new statements have been released, and it's setting off a new Chinese firestorm of epic proportions for Starmer, showing that, you know what, Labour's to blame. He's trying to turn around and say that it's all the Conservatives' fault, this, that, and the others to why it collapsed. No. As the statements are showing right here, it was Labour's policy to actually cosy up to China. And there's more receipts that I've got for you guys, so stay tuned for this Red Alert broadcast live, whether you're watching on YouTube or on X. Hey up, guys. But here are the statements. So this is parts from the 21st of February 2025 and the 4th of August 2025 statements excerpted. Are we to believe that the Deputy National Security Advisor just decided to include these two political statements about the current government's policy with no political input? Because Starmer here is essentially denying that Labour did not in any way, shape or form, and the government didn't in any way, shape or form interfere with the China spy case. Yeah. Here's the first part of the statement that's going viral. So it's important for me to emphasise, however, that the UK government is committed to pursuing a positive relationship with China to strengthen understanding, cooperation and stability. The government's position is that we will cooperate where we can, compete where we need to and challenge where we must, including on issues of national security. Apologies. Then the next statement going across here says, it's important for me to emphasise, however, that the government is committed to pursuing a positive economic relationship with China. The government believes that the UK must continue to engage with international partners on trade and investment to grow our economy while ensuring that our security and values are not compromised. So, yeah, this is the Deputy National Security Advisor, right? Turning round and saying that the Labour government's policy is to cosy up to China. Pretty much from what I'm reading here, at whatever cost. At whatever cost. Does that include the government, and I have to say allegedly here, butting their noses into the China spy case and getting involved to the point where they're to blame for its collapse? Oh, there's even more, guys. Buckle up, because you are in for a freaking bumpy ride. Because in addition, right, Starmer has been caught in even more lies, if you can believe. So this is from Nick Timothy MP, saying the government said it couldn't publish its evidence that led to the collapse of the China spy trial because the CPS wouldn't allow it. The CPS says this is a lie. So here, quoting from an article, the CPS has publicly denied the government's claim, saying that it had made no request for the government not to release the statement. The CPS said the statements were provided to us for the purpose of criminal proceedings, which are now over. The material contained in them is not ours, and it's a matter for the government, independently from the CPS, to consider whether or not to make that material public. So Starmer's turning round and initially said he couldn't make the material public because the CPS said it wasn't allowed. But the CPS are turning around and saying there's no live case anymore. So the material that we've got, it's not ours anymore. It's for the government to decide what they want to do with it. So Keir Starmer, right, has been caught in even more lies by the CPS themselves. Now, Keir Starmer even tried to convince us that James Cleverly didn't see China as a threat to national security. However, yeah, thanks for Tim for all at TimmyVote on X here. Here is James Cleverly blowing Starmer's claims out of the water.
British policy towards China has three pillars. First, we will strengthen our national security protections wherever Beijing's actions pose a threat to our people or our prosperity. We are not going to be silent about interference in our political system, or technology theft, or industrial sabotage. We will do more to safeguard academic freedom and research. And when there are tensions with other objectives, we will always put our national security first. Hence, we are building our 5G network in the most secure way, not the fastest or the cheapest way.
Yeah. I don't hear James Cleverly here turning around and saying we need to be busy mates with China, right? Oh, and let's go one step further, because James Cleverly right here calls Starmer out for misquoting him in Parliament. Here we go.
In the statement that the Security Minister made earlier this week, and then again in answer to a question, I have been misquoted, and the misquote, I think, is significant. It has been said that I, in a speech at Mansion House, said that describing China as a threat was impossible, impractical, and most importantly, unwise. The quote was that describing China as one word, or our policy in one word, is impossible, impractical, and most importantly, unwise. And, Mr. Speaker, in that speech, I went on to say that our policy first, we will strengthen our national security protections wherever Beijing's actions pose a threat to our people or prosperity. And I finished by saying, and when there are tensions with other objectives, we will always put our national security first. How can I get redress for this misquote, Mr. Speaker?
Yeah. So James Cleverly even called Starmer out for misquoting him in Parliament. Could you dare say that by misquoting James Cleverly in Parliament that Starmer may have, I don't know, misled Parliament? I'm just asking for a friend here. Now, as Stephen Barrett says, we were told that misleading the House is a serious matter. Two-tier House of Commons, guys. And so here, Nick Timothy MP also calls out Keir Starmer's lies, saying the following here in Parliament.
Mr. Speaker, I was slightly baffled by the Minister's answer just now, saying that it's not the government's job, so it's not ministers' jobs to vet witness statements when they're made on behalf of the government. This is exactly the point. They are accountable. The Prime Minister said that the evidence that was relevant to the case was the last government's China policy. But the statements published last night showed that they were changed to reflect this government's China policy. This is not the only way in which the Prime Minister's story has fallen apart. But on this specific point, what the Prime Minister told the House wasn't correct, was it?
It was. There was no political interference from this government under any of those statements that were made. There was not, and it doesn't matter how many times the honourable members allege it, that is the case.
Wow. Now, this raised a very important question that was made in Parliament. This was under the Official Secrets Act urgent question. So have a load at this, guys.
Front bench at that time, Tom Tugendhat.
May I start, Mr. Speaker, by saying very briefly quite how this feels. My home has been broken into, my files have been ransacked, somebody has been put in my office by a hostile state, and two parties are playing politics with it. This is national security of the United Kingdom. The elected people of Tunbridge chose me. They may have chosen wrong, but they did. The elected people of other parts of the United Kingdom chose everybody else in this House. It is up to them to choose who represents them. And yet here we have two individuals seeking to extract information from us. And the government's response is not, as mine was, do everything you can to make sure the prosecution works, but no, process. Well, who the hell's side are you on? This isn't about the bureaucracy, this is about leadership. We're not sent here to be civil servants, we're sent here to lead the country and to make decisions. And instead, and I feel nothing but fondness for the Minister in his place, and I'm very sorry that he's been sent out on his, not quite first outing, but pretty close. It is on his first outing to defend the indefensible. Because what he's got the position of doing now is to effectively say that he's not a politician, he's a bureaucrat, there's nothing he can do, and frankly, he shouldn't even be here in the first place. Because that seems to be the Prime Minister's line. Former Attorneys General have got up and they have prosecuted on the state's behalf. This Attorney General and this Prime Minister have said, not on my watch, not worth the effort.
Can I thank you for that? And
I'd be absolutely miffed as well. Now, as Bahram Yu says right here, that, yeah, there are now calls for dissolution of Parliament, seeing as the civil servants are really running the country at this point. And, you know, Bahram Yu says, I think many of us could get behind that request. Hell freaking yeah, we can. Abso-freaking-lutely. Now, Kemi Badenoch, of course, is going to be starting to punch holes into Starmer's story. And to be fair, a 6-year-old could do it with her freaking eyes closed, really, at that point, right? And now she does this in Parliament by saying the following here.
They were let off under Labour.
Yeah!
He has not answered any questions. On Monday, Mr. Speaker, on Monday, the Security Minister repeatedly told the House that ministers did not take decisions, that it was the Deputy National Security Advisor who had full freedom. Is the government seriously saying that only one man, the Deputy National Security Advisor, had anything to do with this failure?
No. And they're saying that, and guess what? They are lying to you. They're trying to throw the Deputy National Security Advisor under the bus. That's their fall guy right now. It's not going to work. It's not going to work.
Is he seriously saying that the Deputy did not discuss with the National Security Advisor, did not discuss with the Home Secretary or with anyone in Downing Street? Is the Prime Minister seriously saying that?
Yes.
He's like, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. Starmer just admitted it, yeah. That's what he's saying. Are you shizzing me right now? Now, the MI5 chief, oh, dude is not happy. It's being reported that he's frustrated over the collapse of the China spy case, revealing his team foiled a China-linked plot only last week, saying, do Chinese state actors present a UK national security threat? Yes, they do. Every day. Every day. And this is the thing, right? Starmer, it's getting darker for Starmer, right? Much darker, much worse. Why? Because from all of this, Starmer's now facing an inquiry that he potentially struck a secret deal with China over their new embassy. Which, by the way, there are so many problems with this freaking super embassy, it's untrue. The biggest one that I've read about is that there's this basement at this super embassy and China's not telling the UK what they're doing with it. Or just something along those lines. Come on. No. This shouldn't be happening in the first place. That China spy case should have continued to go through unimpeded. The government should have cooperated with CPS where required, instead of stonewalling and not providing the information that CPS needed. And this scenario should never be in front of us in the first place. But here we are. So, yeah, Starmer is now to face a brand new ethics inquiry over the Chinese super embassy that potentially struck a secret deal with China over all of this, right? So on Friday, China warned that the UK would face consequences unless the controversial planning application was approved. In comments suggesting it believed the government had promised the embassy would go ahead, a Chinese foreign ministry spokesperson accused Britain of showing disregard for contractual spirit and failing to honour its commitments. But yeah, apparently we'll face consequences if the planning application isn't approved. That is literally, guys, okay, another country, a foreign administration threatening us. Threatening the UK. Approve the planning permission for our super embassy or else. And that's coming from China. That's coming from China. A country that it seems Keir Starmer wants to go into bed with. Why else would the spy trial collapse? Come on. Oh, there's more. You think that's it? There is freaking more. But let's get into this bit first. So the Conservatives said that if any deal had taken place, it would be a flagrant breach of the ministerial code and open the whole process to judicial review. Number 10 has denied that any such deal had been made. But as I just mentioned, a Chinese minister's turning around and saying, literally, stick to what you promised us, otherwise there's going to be consequences. In other words, stick to what you promised us. That sure sounds like a deal was made behind the scenes when it comes to this embassy between Starmer and China. Definitely sounds like that, doesn't it? Otherwise, why would the Chinese minister turn around and say, keep to your end of the bargain or else? There's only a keep your end of the bargain if an agreement was made in the first place for you then to keep your end of the bargain in the first place. Yet number 10's turning around and saying no deal has been made. No. Not based on what a foreign ministry spokesperson has said here. And now threatening us. China's literally threatening us, the UK. What we're going to do about it. I don't want us to roll over. I want us to fight back. I want us to turn around to China and say, piss off. You're spying on us. You're breaking international law by spying on us. You're being caught. Piss off. Can someone in the freaking government just have the freaking balls to stand up to China? Or do you know what? Can Trump just come to the UK, make us the next new state of the United States of America and just take over at this point? Please. We need someone with balls to stand up to China right now. And Starmer's freaking rolling over for them. Just like he rolls over for alleged Ukrainian rent boys. Who knows, right? That's still going on and I'm still keeping an eye on it. Stay tuned. Because things are starting to happen again there. Now, the Tories have written to Sir Laurie Magnus, the independent ethics advisor for the government, to ask him to investigate whether Starmer and other ministers had broken the ministerial code. And so last year it emerged that Starmer had discussed the embassy situation with the president of China, President Xi. Even though Downing Street then failed to disclose that such a conversation had taken place in the first instance. So they have the conversation. Starmer has the conversation with President Xi about the embassy, right? Then fails to disclose that that conversation had taken place. Why? Why did Starmer fail to disclose that this conversation took place between himself and President Xi over this embassy? To not disclose that this conversation took place indicates to me that they did that because they wanted to hide it. They wanted to hide that conversation and not let anyone know that that conversation took place. If that's the case, why? Why? And yeah, why? And so Sir James cleverly, as I reported on earlier on, who Starmer completely misquoted and then cleverly called him out on it, said Keir Starmer needs to come clean on the dodgy deal he struck with the Chinese government last year. Planning is a quasi-judicial process and decisions need to be made with an open mind. At every stage, the Labour government has tried to force this mega embassy through and silence the growing concerns of our security and intelligence agencies. One way to do that is allegedly interfering with the China spy case to the point where it collapses. Potentially. Who knows, right? Allegedly. Blah, blah, blah. We know. We freaking know what's happened here. Come on. If the government has predetermined the process, cleverly says, any planning decision will be unlawful, and this would also be a breach of the ministerial code. There would be strong grounds for judicial review if the planning process is being compromised. Keir Starmer has no backbone and has compromised Britain's national interest and public propriety by hosting the white flag of surrender. This is why I said earlier on, Starmer wants to roll over and go into bed with China. After everything they've done against us, after sending over their spies and getting caught out, he still wants to get into bed with them. I showed you those two statements earlier on that's making the rounds at the moment, that's going viral. It's Labour's policy to try and get into bed with China. That's what they want to do now. And they're going with whatever cost it takes to do that, including, it seems, impeding on our national security. That's big. That's massive. That's freaking humongous. And he sat there with a straight face saying that he's done nothing wrong whatsoever. Piss off, you freaking cowbag liar of a hellhole. What the deuce? What the deuce? And so, with there being evidenced, as outlined in that report from the Telegraph, that Starmer did discuss with the embassy, with President Xi, even though Downing Street failed to disclose that such a discussion had actually happened, right? Kevin Hollinrake, MP from North Yorkshire, Yorkshire represent, is putting Starmer into more hot water. Turning around and saying, I've written to the independent advisor requesting an investigation into a breach of the ministerial code. Britain must not be bought or bullied by Beijing. But this is the thing, right? Do you know what's even more sickening? It's not only that Britain is being bought and bullied by Beijing, by China. Starmer's freaking allowing it. He's literally rolling over and allowing this to happen. That's not the kind of leader I want for the UK. Is that the kind of leader you want for the UK? Do you want a leader that rolls over and just follows whatever China wants? Or follows any country that is hostile against us? You want a leader like that? I know I don't. F that noise. I don't want that leader. To be fair, I never voted for freaking Starmer in the first place. So as far as I'm concerned, my conscience is definitely cleared. And now we find out that the actual approval for the Chinese embassy, building on everything that I've given you so far, could actually be freaking illegal. Here, The Guardian reporting, Chinese embassy approval could be unlawful if UK ministers gave advance assurances. So if Keir Starmer or his team made promises to the Chinese government about the embassy, it could constitute, quote, actual or apparent predetermination of the planning application according to the legal opinion by Lord Banner. So now you're getting the legal opinions through, turning around and saying, look, if Starmer or his government or had promised beforehand to the Chinese government that, yeah, you can have the embassy and the planning application will go through and everything will be fine, blah, 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 blah. If they actually did that, what we suspect they did, right? Yes, that could actually have been illegal. Totally illegal. Totally against the law. Totally against the law. Ministers are now under pressure to clarify whether they privately assured Chinese officials that they would progress the application after it had stalled under the Conservatives. So, you got to ask yourself, why did the Conservatives stall this application? Why did the Conservatives stall the progress of this application? What did they find out? Where they then turned around and said, no, we want this application to now die. We want it to go away. What did they find out? Because whatever they found out that caused them then to stall the application for this Chinese embassy, I bet you £1 million freaking pounds Starmer knows. Yet he's allowing it to go through or trying to push it through by whatever means necessary, including allegedly either him or the government, but the government is him anyway, so let's be real here, causing the China spy trial to collapse. Come on. Now, China, it's been reported here, reapplied for planning permission as soon as Labour took power. They didn't miss a beat, did the guys? They had a sneaky suspicion that Starmer was going to roll over for them. And they were right. They were right. Because President Xi raised the matter directly with Starmer in their first call in August 2024. So the President Xi, China, did not waste any time. As soon as Starmer got into power, right, they restarted their application for the embassy. And the first call that President Xi has with our Prime Minister, it was important enough for President Xi to raise the issue of this embassy. Yeah. Feel sick yet? I know I do. Starmer apparently then told the Chinese president on the margins of the G20 summit in November 2024, quote, "You raised the Chinese embassy building in London when we spoke on the telephone. We've since taken action by calling in that application." So Starmer has already admitted that they've already taken action to try and push this embassy through, right? So what other action has Starmer and his government taken to make sure this embassy is pushed through? Because if he's admitting that he's already taken action to try and push this embassy through, how far do you think he'll go for that? How far do you think he'll go for China? Let me put it this way to you, right? Starmer goes pretty far, right, for every other country, right, in the world. And every other nationality, apart from the British people, apart from us, the people he's supposed to represent, the people he's supposed to actually serve. He's more bothered and puts more emphasis on serving people that are not British, right, who live thousands of freaking miles away than us. And he's doing it again, this time with China. So Luke de Pulford, Executive Director of the Interparliamentary Alliance on China, which is IPAC, said, quote, "Lord Banner has laid down a marker. If the rumours are proven true and unlawful assurances were given to Beijing, the government could face a catastrophic judicial review where all the details would be laid to bear. Do you know what? Bring that review on. I want to see that review. I want it all laid on the table. What the frick has been going on? I want to know." You see, when reporters, sometimes if you didn't laugh, you'd freaking cry, right? Because when we've got reporters here trying to tell us the story from outside the Chinese embassy, guess who the Chinese call? And guess what? It ain't Ghostbusters. Freaking armed police. They called the armed police on a reporter on GB News, Patrick Christie's. Here we go.
Well, since we've been here at the Chinese embassy, armed police have turned up. Fascinating, really, because it would appear that we're guarding Chinese state secrets better than we're guarding our own. Hello, sir, how are you? Are you all right? Good, thank you. How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad.
Good stuff.
He's right, though. It appears we put more emphasis and more care on protecting other countries' secrets rather than our own. I mean, think about it this way. The one that springs to mind more recently was the leak from the Ministry of Defence of all the informants from Afghanistan that helped us during the Afghanistan war, when the UK and US were in Afghanistan. And now we have to pay for that because they've brought them all over here with their families, and for the rest of their lives, we're having to pay for their upkeep. Yeah, state of the UK. Look after everyone else instead of our own. Instead of us. Yeah. I am pissed. I am angry. And it ain't just me. Millions of other people in this country are feeling the exact same way.
Yeah, I'm due a show for GB News. Obviously, we're just here to report on all the Chinese spying.
We've had a complaint from the embassy.
Have you?
Yes, just regarding some of the behaviours going on.
Oh, okay. What the Chinese did was hack into all of our phones, emails, government documents, diplomatic wires, but they are quite angry with me coming here and trying to talk to people.
And no trying to gain access to the premises.
No, we'll never try to gain access.
Obviously, trespassing onto diplomatic premises.
I mean, that would be absolutely awful if someone allowed themselves into the diplomatic space without permission, wouldn't it?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Ultimately, Stephen Barrett here says that on the spy trial collapse, prosecuting spies, protecting us is national security 101. National security 101. And national security is the first duty of His Majesty's government and his Prime Minister. The buck stops there. And if our government and Starmer cannot uphold the first duty, which is upholding and protecting our national security, goodbye. Good riddance. We need an emergency general election freaking yesterday. Now, this is not going away anytime soon. No matter how much Starmer tries to wish it, or tries to perform some kind of weird, hooky, voodoo, BS, whatever the frick, right? Because, as Marcus Agrippa says here on X, Starmer lied to Parliament. Not misled Parliament, he lied. He lied. Starmer lied to Parliament. I suppose misleading is a form of lying. But why are they lying? Why are they lying? Now, this is something that for me is not widely getting enough attention. So I'm going to do my bit here on Political Nerds and show you this. Why are they lying? Why is the government lying? Why is Starmer lying? Why are they misleading? Why are they not giving us the full truth? Why are they trying to square the circle? Why are they trying to freaking polish a turd? Which, by the way, polishing a turd is useless. Because no matter how much you polish a turd is still freaking a turd, right? And this stinks to high hell of so much turd, it's unreal. But could Starmer and the government be lying because of things like this? Now here we've got Dominic Cummings. You don't know who he is. Freaking Google his name now. Saying brilliant. After letting China buy the data infrastructure used by MI6, Cabinet Office, Ministry of Defence, etc. for secret data, and covering up and lying about it this week, the government now wants to let China buy all the water supply for London. The system is working as intended. So here, CK Infrastructure, which is based in Hong Kong, is ready to make a bid for the struggling Thames Water. Hong Kong owners of Northumbrian Water are ready to make a bid for struggling Thames Water and invest what it takes to get the business back on a stable financial footing, according to a letter to the water regulator. Off what has been told by a senior executive from CK Infrastructure that it is ready to submit a bid for Thames, which is currently in discussions with its own creditors about a separate £3.15 billion rescue plan. So let me get this straight, right? You've got a Hong Kong Chinese company, right, swooping in, wanting to essentially buy all water in London to provide it for all Londoners, yeah? But same said company is already in discussions with its own creditors about a separate over £3 billion rescue plan. If they need over £3 billion to rescue their company, where are they getting the money from to even consider bidding on all the water in London? And why is the government even entertaining the freaking idea of this? Why? Also, as well, why are they entertaining a Chinese company? Put aside the financial issues to one side, right? Why are they entertaining a Chinese company to buy up essentially all the water in London, yeah, when we had a trial that collapsed because of the government about 2 Chinese spies, where there was evidence that the CPS had that China was spying on us, spying on the UK, spying on our politicians. They've already proven to us that they are, for the UK, a hostile state. Yet the government, regardless of, even ignoring, let's say, their financial issues, right, needed a £3 billion rescue package. What the hell? But the government is still entertaining a Chinese Hong Kong company to come in and buy all the water in London. Please make this make sense. Please. This is why I said there needs to be more spotlight on this part of the story here. And more people talking about this. This is insane. Now, Paranormal Channel says, what have we got left? For this story, buckle up. We are not done yet. You think we're done? Ooh, no, we are not. Now, Labour, they're still trying to say that pigs fly. They're trying to say that when we fart, rainbows and butterflies and unicorns shoot out of our ass. Oh, and that Starmer has not misled and lied to Parliament over the Chinese spy scandal. Yeah, watch this, guys.
All right. If Keir Starmer is found to have misled the Commons, as Kemi Badenoch has suggested, he'll have to resign, won't he?
I don't believe that he has. I think it's really clear the China situation that I set out. It was an independent decision made by the CPS, and Kemi Badenoch has questions to answer. When she was asked at the time of the case, she said, she was asked, is China an enemy? She said it's a challenge. Asked whether it was a security threat, she said they're a challenge. This is all about the Conservatives' policy about China at the time.
Liar, 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 pants on fire. We already have, right, the excerpts from those statements from the CPS where they're turning round and they're saying that it's Labour's policy to also try and get into bed with China pretty much at whatever cost, yeah? And for him to say the Conservatives have questions they've got to answer, hang on a minute, the Conservatives stalled the application in the end. They took action to try and make sure it didn't go through in the end. It was Labour that reignited it. It was Keir Starmer in his first call when he got to Prime Minister level to President Xi in China. The first ever call between them, and they were discussing the embassy. He even said to President Xi, in a conversation that wasn't even announced properly, disclosed properly, saying to President Xi, yeah, we're going to sort out the embassy situation. Starmer's now under investigation, in an ethics investigation, to figure out if he broke the law, if he broke the ministerial code, promising something that he shouldn't have done in the first place, essentially. For me, it's not the Conservatives that have to answer out. No! Again, they tried to stall the application in the end. To the point where China, as soon as Starmer was elected, China resubmitted their application And the president of China made a point to bring up the embassy and the planning application in his first call with Starmer. So, yeah, the Conservatives, they've got nothing to answer here. Actually, it's Starmer and Labour. But this is just a clear freaking example of playing the blame game and trying to confuse us to the point where we don't know what's going on. So we don't know really what questions to ask and who to ask them to and how to really follow this story and understand it in order to find out the lies and criticise the hell out of it. I'm not falling for this. Are you? Still trying to say with a straight face that there was no political involvement in the China spy case and that Starmer had not misled Parliament or lied to them over the Chinese spy scandal. Are you kidding me? Speaking of which, yeah, here's Starmer right here, yeah? Still trying to say with a straight face that there was no political involvement in the China spy case.
They were let off under Labour. He has not answered any questions. On Monday, Mr. Speaker, on Monday, the Security Minister repeatedly told the House that ministers did not take decisions, that it was the Deputy National Security Advisor who had full freedom. Is the government seriously saying that only one man, the Deputy National Security Advisor, had anything to do with this failure? Is he seriously saying that the Deputy did not discuss with the National Security Advisor, did not discuss with the Home Secretary or with anyone in Downing Street? Is the Prime Minister seriously saying that?
Yes.
Insane. Insane. And this, right? Oh. You might be asking, how does the Chagos Islands come into all of this? Because they do. Because this is all coming at the same time as one of the most political charged votes is happening. The vote to give away the Chagos Islands. As Rebecca Paul, MP, says here, today the House will vote on giving away the Chagos Islands and paying through the nose for the pleasure. How can any MP vote in favour of this when so many questions remain about the government's role in the collapse of the China spy case? Here we go.
Countries have lost wars and gone on to be offered treaties with more generous terms than this. Yet the front bench opposite comes to this House and calls it a triumph. The UK will be weaker and poorer as a result of this deal, and it is shameful that the government has brought such a damaging, insulting and senseless document to this House. By moving forwards with this government is failing in its first duty to ensure the safety and security of our citizens and nation. This day will go down in the history books as the day the United Kingdom was diminished by dangerous fools.
Yep. Now, this has all led to Kemi Badenoch writing to Starmer, right? Saying Keir Starmer's misleading statements on the China spy scandal are a breach of trust with MPs and the public. He must correct the record in the Commons as soon as possible. Now, this is her letter to Starmer. Read it at your leisure there. Now, just before I went live, this was actually published by Chris Phillip, MP, on X. Breaking, my urgent question in Parliament just now on the government's handling of the China spy trial collapse. Ministers keep telling us no Labour ministers or advisers were involved in any way, yet the Sunday Times reports that they were. The government story keeps changing. We need to get to the truth. Breaking, watch this clip.
Wednesday, the Prime Minister told this House that no minister or special adviser was involved in the handling of the China spy case. Yet the Sunday Times has since reported that the Home Secretary had, quotes, heard the case might collapse and had made representations to ensure the evidence put forward was as strong as possible. So I asked the Minister, when did the Home Secretary become aware the case might collapse? And what representations did the Home Secretary or her proxies make about the evidence and to whom? Why has the House been told, including just now, that ministers and advisers were not involved in any way when the Sunday Times reports that they were? The Sunday Times also reported on a key meeting that took place on September the 1st, a meeting the government originally denied took place. Is it true Jonathan Powell chaired that meeting? Did the meeting discuss the CPS view that the evidence provided to that point was inadequate? And did that meeting discuss the possibility of providing further evidence in the case? And will the Minister agree to publish the minutes of all meetings in which this case was discussed and the correspondence relating to it? The Sunday Times reported that following the meeting, the Attorney General's office was asked to speak to the CPS. Did anyone from the AGO speak directly or indirectly to the CPS after that meeting? And can the Minister confirm that Dan Chugg from the Foreign Office was at that 1st September meeting? And can the Minister also confirm it was the same Dan Chugg who approached the Lord Speaker with a proposed deal in which the Chinese ambassador would be allowed back into Parliament? The Sunday Times also reported that the DNSA is understood to have acknowledged privately that the decision not to say China is an ongoing threat was political in nature. Is that true? Finally, the current government's position has been that all the evidence provided related to the last government's policy, but we now know that is categorically not true. We know from Matt Collins' third statement of August this year, in paragraph 8, that he copied and pasted from the Labour manifesto, and he stressed the importance the current government attaches to a positive relationship with China, weakening the evidence compared to 2023 and bringing in current government policy, contrary to what we have been told in recent weeks. So, why has the government been providing this House with inaccurate information, and why did ministers know what the CPS wanted but refuse to give it to them?
That's essentially the question. Why they're lying, why they're misleading, and why essentially didn't the government provide the information that CPS needed for the China spy scandal case situation. Now, Kemi Badenoch, because this whole situation is an absolute rabbit hole, right? And so she's provided an up-to-date transcript of sorts, right, as to what's happened during this whole China spy case scandal and what has unfolded essentially up to press. So let's go through it. So she says, the facts of the case are this. 2 men were arrested and charged with spying on MPs on behalf of China. Crown prosecutors thought they had evidence to convict them, but it seems somebody somewhere in government collapsed the trial. The bit we haven't got to the bottom of yet is who and why. It's not a surprise that China is spying on us. We've known about this for years. In fact, MI5 foiled another plot from China only last week. Of course, we know that China is a threat, but they are not some distant bogeyman. They're a global power and a permanent member of the UN Security Council. So when the Conservatives were in government, we used moderate language about China in public. We kept diplomatic channels open, but we weren't naive. Our security apparatus were constantly disrupting China's efforts against the UK and updating ministers on the growing threat. It was for that reason that we introduced a range of laws and reforms to protect the UK. And it's why when our Solicitor General made the decision to prosecute the 2 suspects in the China case, he did so based on a clear-eyed position about China being a threat to the UK's security. Behind the scenes, we were compiling reams of information about the threat that China posed to the UK. Every day, the Prime Minister and other senior ministers got intelligence reports, including from GCHQ, about Chinese cyber attacks, espionage operations, and other measures to undermine and damage our security. The present Labour government is trying to pretend files don't exist, but they do. I've seen them. When we left office last year, as far as we were concerned, this spying case was being prosecuted. The CPS was calling it a slam dunk. Then last month, seemingly out of nowhere, the case was dropped. The 2 men, Chris Cash and Christopher Berry, denied the charges. At first, the government claimed it was surprised. But then, in an unprecedented intervention, the CPS went public, saying that for months the government had been refusing to provide the evidence they needed about China's threat. Only when the prosecutors gave up hope of ever getting it did they abandon the trial. In the weeks since, the government's story has changed 4 times. Its panicked flurry of finger-pointing has fired off in all directions, and one by one their stories have collapsed. We now know the Prime Minister was made aware the case was failing and did nothing to intervene. His gut instinct was not how to protect our national security, but how this could be pinned on the Conservatives. Keir Starmer went as far as deliberately misquoting ex-ministers such as the former Foreign Secretary James Cleverly in the House of Commons, leading to gasps of astonishment on the floor of the House. But the government's story has been torn apart by two former heads of MI6, two former heads of the civil service, and the former director of public prosecutions. Desperate to pin this on anyone but himself, Starmer's latest excuse is to blame civil servants working under him. And this is why I said earlier on, following on from another post from X, well, hang on a minute. If Starmer's blaming the civil servants, then he's essentially turning around and saying that the civil servants are running the show, not him. He's the Prime Minister. So if the civil servants are really running the show and not Starmer, then he should resign, dissolve Parliament, and we have an emergency general election. Right? I'm not completely, losing all my brain cells on this one, right, guys? Let's continue. So he then, Kemi Badenoch then goes on to write, when the CPS asked the government for more evidence on China's threat to support the case, the government instead added paragraphs saying that China presents lots of opportunities. Curiously, this text had been lifted straight from the Labour Party manifesto. I've known civil servants refuse to insert a comma if they thought it political. And as we know from the two extracts, right, from the evidence that has now been made public, it's Labour's policy to be in bed with China because of all the opportunities that they can provide to the UK. Yeah. They're ignoring all the opportunities that China can make to the UK when it comes to the opportunity of threatening our national security, threatening our sovereignty, threatening our borders, threatening our intelligence, threatening our literal security. And yeah, this is the government that's turning round and saying, do you know what? Yeah, let's entertain the idea of a China/Hong Kong company that needs over £3 billion rescue deal. But yeah, let's entertain the opportunity here of this China-Hong Kong company basically buying up all the water in London and controlling all the water in London. Yeah, China brings us tons of opportunity, right? Is the freaking bed. They're proving time and time again they're hostile against the UK. Security services saying only last week they foiled a freaking attempt from China. They're not our friends. They're not our friends. So Kemi Badenoch says, yet they claim that at no point did the Prime Minister, any government minister or any political appointment, including the National Security Advisor, have any involvement in this decision or in fact any involvement in the case at all. First, if this is true, then it's really not the defence of Keir Starmer thinks it is. Absolving himself of involvement in a matter of national security and allowing unelected civil service to run the country is not the strong leadership Britain wants or needs. But this version of events is so implausible and would be so utterly incompetent that I suspect there must be more to it. I suspect that just as we were told there was nothing to see with Peter Mandelson and Angela Rayner, that once you start pulling on the thread, the whole thing will unravel. And this is the thing. We are pulling on the thread. And so much is freaking unraveling. Now there's all these threads and we're pulling, and it's just more and more horrific information is coming out as to how, essentially, as far as I'm concerned, the government is acting not in our best interests, right? Not in the best interests of the UK and the British public. No. How the government, for some reason, our government, is acting in the best interests of freaking China. Yeah. Try and swallow that if you can. So, Kemi says, I've been the business secretary. I've seen the pressure that China puts on ministers. I've seen how hard Beijing works to further its political and economic interests. And I've seen which buttons they press or try to press. Like, you know, the minister turning round and saying from China that the UK would face consequences unless the controversial planning application was approved. Yeah. We've seen how far and how hard Beijing will work to achieve their aims, to the point of literally publicly threatening the UK now at this point to do what they want us to do or else. She then says it's why I didn't go to China as a minister, and it's why for years the Conservative government took a cautious approach to Chinese influence. But when Labour came into office, they wanted to do things differently. They watered down Britain's China policy, and Starmer appointed Jonathan Powell as his national security advisor, a figure from the Blair years with known links to China. If you think that Tony Blair, as soon as he left as Prime Minister, right, had no influence and nothing else to do with politics here in the UK and with government, not a chance. He's been behind the scenes all along, pulling the freaking strings. And this is just further evidence of that. She then says, I'm sure that like Henry II and Thomas Becket, Starmer, or at least Powell, was storming around Whitehall saying, who will rid me of this troublesome court case? They did nothing to help it and everything to signal that they didn't want it. For example, China is now looking for permission to build a new super embassy in London. And this week, the government delayed that decision until December to avoid granting it in the middle of this spy scandal. So in other words, right, they were supposed to look at approving it this month. But because this scandal is in the news at the moment, they're kicking it down the road to December, hoping that the scandal will die away so that by December, they can quietly approve the embassy, and then that'll be it. There'll be no blowback and everything's Gucci. No, nothing's Gucci at all with this. At all. This embassy should not be going through now. This planning application should be denied with a capital freaking D. There's so much wrong with it, it's unreal. Then she says, then you've got the case of the Jingye. And if I've mispronounced that, I apologise. The Chinese company that owned British Steel until Labour nationalised it. Rachel Reeves is being chased for £1 billion in compensation. But reports are that China could make this go away under the right circumstances. So, in other words, Rachel Reeves, our Chancellor, right, China is trying to put her on the hook for £1 billion in compensation by nationalising British Steel and taking it away from China and their hands. Yeah. China's turning round to freaking our Chancellor, right? Reading this, right? This is my interpretation. Make your own. China's turning around to our Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, Rachel from Accounts, turning around and saying, we've got you on the hook for £1 billion in compensation for nationalising British Steel and taking that away from us. But guess what? We'll make that disappear under the right circumstances. How freaking scary is that? And the scarier part of it is that the government, eyes wide freaking open, walked into this scenario. They didn't just walk into this scenario. They skipped holding President Xi's freaking hand into this freaking scenario with smiles on their faces. What they didn't realise, because they're too stupid and thick, is that they were skipping, grinning and smiling into the freaking Chinese lion's den. Because here we go. China is now showing their claws, baring their teeth. One of their ministers, as I said, saying, approve this or else. Approve the embassy, otherwise there's going to be consequences. Literally threatening the UK. Further threats here. China putting Rachel from Accounts on the hook for £1 billion in compensation. But then turning around and saying, we can make that go away if you do what we want you to do. Literally buying our Chancellor for £1 billion to make her do what they want her to do. So, yeah, if anyone had a question of, you know, how much does it cost to buy the Chancellor and put him or her in their pocket to do their bidding, apparently the going rate is £1 billion. Apparently. Kemi Badenoch then says there's nothing particularly unusual in China trying to exert its influence on Britain, but what Starmer doesn't realise is that regimes like China respond to strength, not weakness. Which is why I said earlier on, we need a leader to turn around to China and say, piss off. You're a hostile state. You're not a friend of the UK. You're hostile. All the spies that you're sending our way. We foiled an attempt last week, the security services have confirmed. They're not our friend, they are hostile. It's as simple as that. And so we need a leader that turns around and tells them to bog off. We're not going to take your threats. Instead, we're going to up the ante. I can't remember which TV series it is. I think it's Lie to Me. One of my favourite TV series of all time. If you've not watched it, I do recommend you do. And there's a main character there called Cal. And I think it's him. Forgive me if I'm wrong. But I think he turns around and he says, right, when someone puts the proverbial gun to your head, right, to try and coerce you in doing something you don't want to do, right? You got two choices. You could allow yourself to be coerced, all right. Or you could find a bigger proverbial gun and put it to their head instead. And that's what the UK should be doing right now to China. China, right, my interpretation from what Kemi Badenoch is saying here, has a gun to our heads. Saying, do this or else. We've got you on the hook for £1 billion. Do this or else. They've got that gun to our heads. Yeah, Starmer could roll over and allow to be coerced. Or he could find a bigger proverbial gun and point it towards China's head. And be like, I don't think so. Piss off. Which route do you think Starmer's going to go on that one? I live in hope. But hope is slowly dying away at this point. Because the more information that comes out about this China spy case scandal, the worse and darker it's getting. It is getting darker for Starmer. To the point where I'm absolutely amazed how he's still in office, how he is still our Prime Minister, and how we still have a Labour government. I'm amazed how he's not resigned and called for an emergency general election. I'm absolutely amazed. Now, Kemi finishes off saying, if Britain is weak, we'll be taken advantage of. And if our Parliament can be spied on and no one is held accountable, we have lost more than a court case. We'll lose the ability to keep British people safe, along with the respect and trust of our allies. The government will keep trying to sweep this under the rug. And because it's complicated and people aren't paying attention, they might get away with it. But someone needs to come clean about what happened here. For Britain's national security, for our own freaking sanity at this point, we need to get to the bottom of the story, and the Conservatives won't stop digging until we do. And here, Kemi shares this right here, this article, with the Times also reporting on this, saying China responds to strength and Keir Starmer is desperately weak. Yeah, he is. My conscience is clear. I didn't vote for the moron, let's put it that way. But guys, that's a lot to take in. I absolutely understand. Maybe now you can see why I've done this emergency red alert broadcast today for you guys for this particular story, because it's just immense. There is so much out there. I've brought to you guys the main bits, but shiz the freaking bed. For the government to still continue to say that they've done nothing wrong, that they didn't intervene at all. Just lie after lie after lie. They're making it worse for themselves. And as I said right at the beginning, everything that Starmer's doing to try and deny, to try and deflect, is just making the proverbial noose tighter around his neck. He's now under investigation. I wonder what's going to happen there. But how many more scandals can Starmer and his Labour dictatorship survive? Until that's it, that's the end. And they have to resign and we have to have an emergency general election. Any other leader, any other government in the past would have resigned by now. How is Starmer still allowed to be staying up, standing in all of this? How is the government still allowed to still be in power after all the scandals that has happened over the last 12 months since they've been in power? It gets down to the scariest question that I have of all in all of this, which it gives me shudders down my spine when I even think about it, which is this. Who's protecting Starmer and why? Because like I said, any other Prime Minister in the past and their government would have resigned. And we would have had an emergency general election. With the amount of scandals that we've had from this government over the last 12 months and the severity of these scandals, any other past government and Prime Minister would have resigned, dissolved Parliament, and we would have had an emergency general election. However, with Starmer and his Labour dictatorship, that's not happened. Why? Who's protecting Starmer and why are they protecting Starmer? They are the biggest questions of all that more people now, as far as I'm concerned, they need to ask. And we need to get louder in asking those questions. Because, yeah, we can ask, why did Starmer and the government allegedly ensure that the China spy case collapsed? We can ask, sorry, a bit of an itchy nose there. We can ask, you know, why they are somehow entertaining a Chinese Hong Kong company to look at buying up pretty much all the water in London. We can ask all these questions, right? And the answers, the truth of it will be very interesting indeed, right? And we deserve to know the truth to all those questions. However, the bigger truth, the more important questions that need to be asked and answered is who is protecting Starmer at this point and why? Because if the Chinese government, right, according to Keir Starmer, are turning round and putting our Chancellor, Rachel from Accounts, on the hook for £1 billion for nationalising British Steel and taking it away from China, yeah? What has China got on Starmer? What is China putting Starmer on the hook for? Because the Chancellor is just a hop, skip and jump away from Prime Minister, let's be real here. Who's protecting Starmer and why? With that being said, you guys, that is it for this emergency red alert broadcast. Yeah, it just got darker for Starmer indeed. If you appreciated this and you want more, and unfortunately with the state of the UK at the moment, there's going to be more. Definitely on this China spy case collapse. Make sure you subscribe to join our Alter Nerd tribe here on YouTube. If you're watching on X, make sure you're following me at Steph Alter Nerd. Like, share, comment down below on the replay, your opinion, conspiracy theory, whatever. Who do you think is protecting Starmer and why? And if you do believe that China has something on Starmer, what do you think that might be? Opinion, conspiracy theory, whatever. Let me know in the comments down below. Special thank you to everyone that joined me live today, whether here on YouTube or on X. Thank you so much to everyone in the live chat for keeping me company to the end. Big, massive thanks to those that thumbed up this live stream and subscribed to this channel. Liking this stream and any of my videos is completely free and it helps the community so much. The more likes your favourite YouTube content creator gets, the more YouTube sees the content and thinks, wow, a lot of people like this content, and so promotes the content to a larger amount of people. And as far as I'm concerned at the moment, more people need to know about this. So please do me a favour, like this stream right now and all my videos if you can. Big massive thanks to everyone that's tuned in. I appreciate all your faces, and until the next time, you guys, laters.